Retired IS officer and author of 8 amazing books, Upamanyu Chatterjee needs no introduction. Best known for his first book, English August, which was first published way back in 1988, Upamanyu has always had a distinct style of writing and portraying life in rural as well as urban India. His latest book, The Assassination of Indira Gandhi, is a one-of-its-kind book which is a collection of 12 captivating short stories. And the book, which is published by Speaking Tiger, is already a mega success. So without further ado, let's meet Upamanyu Chatterjee, the 2004 Sahitya Academy Award winner for English. Hello, Mr. Chatterjee. Welcome on Beyond the Lines.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Sir, tell us about The Assassination of Indira Gandhi, the book.
Well, it's my first collection of short stories, which is not to say that I have given up writing longer fiction. But it is that when, ever since I began writing in the mid-80s, I was always plagued by the idea by the germs of various short stories. And fortunately, I'm a scribbler, so I would put these germs away. I'd just note a phrase, a single idea, and I would put them away. And every time I finished a novel, I would tell myself that, okay, now I can do these short stories. And I never got down to them. Then finally, after Fairy Tales at 50 was over, I said, look, why don't I just finish those short stories? Then, as usually happens, the short stories got out of hand. They suddenly became far too many, even for one volume. But I said, no, let me just get one volume out of the way first. So that's it. There you are. I decided, or the title sort of chose itself, because The Assassination of Indira Gandhi, if I remember correctly, was the first story to be published. No one used to publish short stories those days. So, very few people did. So I actually went to, I had to look up addresses of magazines abroad. There was no internet, nothing. I went to the British Council. In those days, it was not even in Kasturba Gandhi Marg. It was at the old office at IFAX. And I looked up the addresses of magazines abroad, and I sent them the assassination. And 6 months later, I got the proofs by ordinary post to read. So the title is a kind of tribute to my first published short story. But I'm happy to be working in both forms.
Okay. In fact, the very first chapter, History Lesson, the book could have been named that as well, because when I read that, then that was, as intriguing as the last chapter was, The Assassination of Indira Gandhi. What lies in between, if you would like to let
History Lesson was, I wrote that last year, was it 2017? History Lesson was actually very, very difficult to do. One, because of its subject matter, and two, as with the other short stories, things that have been in my mind sort of coalesce over years, and finally, luckily for me, they form the material of a short story. I had first read Sir Thomas Roe's journal, God knows when, a long time ago, and it seemed such a funny piece, because it's now on the net, but it's egos. He says, I went to meet Shah Jahan and I couldn't meet him, but so what, I'm a great guy. That's the tone of the journal. And the Foster, who is I think the India office librarian, who was a great editor of the journal. In his footnotes, he's always complimenting Sir Thomas Roe on his skill as a diplomat. Even though Rose spends 4 years in India and gains nothing, absolutely. Gains absolutely nothing. Gets nothing out of the Mughals. So the contrast between Sir Thomas's idea of himself and his editor's idea of Sir Thomas, the contrast between that and the actual achievement of Sir Thomas's 4 years, to me seemed really worthy of a work of fiction. But putting it together was not easy. I had to read up a lot, which was great fun, but still it took a long time. And between that and the assassination are, stories that have been with me for very long. All kinds of different contexts. There's one that predates English August. In fact, there are two that predate English August.
But wasn't it difficult for you to come about with this collection? How did you decide upon the kind of stories that you could pick and choose for this collection, for this volume in particular?
Not quite pick and choose. They are almost all of them are there.
All of them that you wrote. Except
I think 3 that I hope to include in volume 2. They need touching up. These books, these stories too, have been reworked to some extent. The funny thing is when, something that's been published, almost 35 years ago, don't read the same when when you're older. Your tastes have changed. Your idea of what reads well changes. So you tweak a sentence here, a phrase there. You drop certain minor characters. You change the names of characters. The stories finally published have not changed their plots much, but at the same time, I guess not modernized, but they've just been sort of fiddled around with a bit.
What's the kind of reader that you had in mind while assimilating the 12 stories?
Well, I guess the ideal reader obviously doesn't exist, I think, but I don't know, someone vaguely like myself. I mean, how else would one? There is no, I'm going to write for that kind of person. This sort of college-bred, student who reads English fiction. No, it's just someone, who would...
Yeah, more so because these are written in different time zones and, they have varied writing styles as well.
Yeah,
from story to story.
Some of the styles are, I think, dictated by subject matter. Some of them are funny because the subject matter is funny, and some of them are just very, very grim. Some are very formal. The prose of, there's one on the Pied Piper of Hamelin, which I've tried to make as old-fashioned as possible. But as I said, the subject matter, dictates the style.
Define your growing up years that led you into writing and the world of literature.
Well, it's something I've always liked doing. I used to write. I studied in St. Xavier's School here in Delhi, and we had a very nice thing in school. It was a one-act play festival, and I remember, not that one was meant to, but I remember writing plays for those festivals. So I must have been then about 14, 15. Not great works of art, but it was nice to actually write a play and then get your friends to enact it. It began then. Some of the short stories began then. I mean, not any of the serious stuff, but so I have been at it in one sense for as long as I can remember. Then after I began working, I continued the habit, but it's just as I continued reading. It's just something that you like doing, so you continue to do it. So I used to, in fact, write through my my novels. I used to write as an amateur. I used to write because I liked writing. It just made me feel.
So was it only you in the family, or there were others?
My parents used to write in Bengali. They are no longer alive, but they used to write in Bengali. But it's not as though they, sat on my head saying, no, you must write, you must write. No, it's just, we just grew up with books, that's true. But that makes it sound more grand than it actually was. But
during your three decades of service, you happened to be a bureaucrat by day and an author after office. How did you manage the two roles so well?
So well is begging the question, but I did try and write every day, so I used to get up very early. It's a matter of discipline, I think. I used to get up and put in about an hour before, the household woke up. That sort of thing. Take the kids to school, school bus stop, come back, try and do an hour. That, just fit in an hour's work in the morning and an hour's in the evening. Sometimes you don't get the time, but you try and do it every day. That's it's one of the reasons why each of those books took almost 5 years to finish. But I guess it's a bit like a marathon. You ask a marathon runner why he runs, but he still tries and he runs every day. It's a bit like that.
So if I may ask, was there ever a moment when, your office or your seniors or your colleagues, kind of doubted your commitment to your role as an administrator?
Well, I did always have a sobriquet sort of attached to my name and my existence. वो तो लेखक है, वो तो लिखता है. But it was extremely good-natured, I think. And not for one moment did that adversely affect my life as a bureaucrat. They were actually, when English August was first released, they were actually quite nice. I got at least 2 letters from senior bureaucrats saying how the book reminded them of their years. We had a very tiny book launch at the Strand in Bombay in pouring rain. Really pouring rain. And I was then in Thana, so I was an hour and a half late because of traffic jams due to the rain. But I still remember 2 of my senior colleagues attending, just as a kind of beau gesture. So they've been very nice to me. I'm nothing remotely resembling strictures or criticism or anything. I do remember a stint in the Department of Culture, which perhaps I got because I was a writer, but otherwise, no, none. And of course, I sought early retirement 3 years ago because I really wanted to get down full time.
Yeah, that was supposed to be one of my questions.
True, but I don't think, now I do nothing else but write. This I finished pretty quickly, despite history lesson having taken a year. that novella that was published last year, The Revenge of the Non-Vegetarian, that took 8 to 10 months. But so, I hope to be a little more productive. But and it's true, it's much easier not to lead a double life.
But you did manage to do a good job.
Yeah.
Mr. Chatterjee, there is an interesting pattern of sequels to your books. So, what's the reason to keep your characters alive, especially Agastya Sen?
It's not premeditated. It's not as though I tell myself, okay, now I'll do an Agastya book. I should say that I was surprised. I continue to be surprised by his long life. It's been 30 years, but that's the book I am most remembered by, which is a very nice feeling. It's very pleasant. It's very touching. One would think that 30 years later they would, the sort of modern reader would say, okay, this is just about some dislocated old guy, but it's not. And I still meet people who
people across ages have loved it, and they continue to love it,
which is very nice. But that's not the reason why he came back in the Memories of the Welfare State, because in the Memories, as is very clear to anyone who's read the book, he's just a kind of persona. He's just this almost faceless figure through whom you can filter your jokes, because the Memories was just meant to be a funny book. He reappears in the Assassination collection, but that's a story that predates English August. It's The Killings in Madna, if I remember correctly, was published in 1985. The original story has the same characters but with different names. So when I was doing it for this collection, it just seemed natural to call the civil service trainee Agastya Sen. But it fits, it works. Will he come back? If I find something that fits, he certainly will. And for the other characters who are back, there's Jamun and there are others.
Also includes his father.
That is completely different, but it works. That works very well too, because in the Revenge of the Non-Vegetarian, it actually began as a story about the death penalty. I was just curious, and then when I began reading up on the death penalty, I learned that it's not a live issue actually in India, in the sense that the death penalty should be used, rarest of rare cases, is a judgment of the Supreme Court, I think in the late 80s, early 90s, I'm not sure. And that's the principle followed, but, we haven't actually been saying that, okay, abolish it, or it's not an active issue. But what is when I was reading up on the death penalty issue, what did strike me was, actually it strikes everybody, the number of cases of people languishing in jails, etc. And the final outcome of 6 or 7 stories blended together is The Revenge. And then when I was looking at the chronology, and I said, no, this can't take place now, because you need a fax machine, all that. And I said, okay, it'll have to be set in the end of it would have to be in the early 70s. And then when you're working backwards, and I said, oh no, everything just seems to fit perfectly. Because Agastya's father in English August is just this, sort of boring guy. He's just this kind of well-meaning, boring father. And I said, why don't you give him a past? That would actually be quite shocking. And I tried it, and when I was reading it to myself, it seemed to work. And so I left it there. So it certainly wasn't, the revenge didn't begin as a story about Agastya's father. Not at all. He's a late addition, but it seems to fit.
What are you working on next?
Volume 2 of the short stories, but as happened with History Lesson, History Lesson I thought of as a 10,000 or maybe 8,000 to 9,000 word short story. It's 16,000 plus. I fear that, even the stories in the new collection would just go out of hand. But that's what I hope to finish by, say, I'm giving myself till the end of next year.
Till the end of next year. Okay. So I will look forward to reading your next collection of short stories. It was really lovely talking to you. And before we end the show, we would like you to read an excerpt from the book.
The story is, well, it's about sparrows, but the subject matter is really how, I suppose it's sort of an environment thing, how sort of sparrows are dying out because we don't care for them. Well, here we go. This is not a good idea, says Jamun to himself as he shuts the front door in the tomcat's face. The flat is airy, noisy, luminous in the late afternoon light from the open verandas, ready to welcome dust, mosquitoes, flies, wasps, geckos, babblers, pigeons, neighborhood cats, and the occasional observant thief. The workers have left with the panes of glass, sweeping into tiny pyramids in each corner the rubble that is all that remains of their efforts. He puts the cage on the kitchen table, opens its door and waits for the birds to exit. He places next to the cage a cup of water and on its companion saucer some grains of expensive brown rice. He sleeps fitfully that night, disturbed less by the city invading his apartment than by the certainty of his having lost the battle even before he has taken up arms. At 5:17 next morning, he is awake after a fashion, alert enough to see the casualties. The birds, seemingly acclimatized at last, have left their cage. Ronald is on the pelmet above the window and Edith on the stem of the wall lamp. One takes off, the other follows. The whirring ceiling fan gets both. Ronald lands on the mound of rubble beside the door, Edith at the foot of the bed table. Jamun struggles up, his feet scrabble about like spiders to find his slippers. They fail. He walks barefoot to the corpses, picks them up, trembles at their warmth. So small. Once our men of science killed them to unlock nature's other secrets. Now they die in front of us and we don't see what their deaths are saying about what is killing them. Futile, thinks he, are these nature's warnings to the heedless, these providential ways in which sparrows choose to fall.